quick video. I don't know how this is going to affect the algorithm because I'm streaming right after I upload this. But check this out. There are people. Well, let me backtrack. I've made sort of the claim that if there's going to be blood on someone's hands when it comes to some of the deaths that you think could have been in some capacity prevented, it's not on the folks like myself who advocate against mandated lockdowns. I would make the argument that it's on you. If there's going to be a blame to be placed. And here's how. We know, certainly throughout New York City, despite what Cuomo may say and you guys thinking that he's the leader, though so many of the deaths come out of his area, right? Nonetheless, when you look at that and you look at the deaths in terms of, what the average age is, it's very, very old. There's been breakouts among different, dare I say, the nursing homes. That's a big thing. That is not anything that's necessarily unique to New York, that it's happened in other pockets throughout the country, certainly internationally. Even the guys that I think handled it better, like Sweden, they had that issue too, where you have so many of the deaths are in these sort of mismanagement of the focus in terms of where it should have been. Though, don't get me wrong, I still think in comparison to a lot of other countries, as far as at least the more lax mandates, more lax restrictions, they handled it. It's never to be assumed that nobody was going to die from this virus. Silly for us to even pretend like that was ever going to be the case and look at every death and every ticker as this, it could have been like that's just such a silly thing. But I'm going to make the argument that if you just have to place the blame on someone, don't place it on me, place it on yourself. And that's because even before the virus sort of broke out throughout our country, we knew who the most vulnerable population was. We already knew. I was talking about this. Go look at my old videos. Before it even got here, I was talking about who it was impacting. It was impacting the very old, and you had some immunocompromised that was sprinkled in there. But even among the immunocompromised, the vast majority of the people that were dying were older. Like the average age, and even in Italy was like 81, right? So with that being said, you knew who the most impacted people were. Instead of, and this is just goes to point out the government inefficiency, instead of, if you were to build a policy, though I think you shouldn't have been in control of this anyway, either way, let the private individuals do this. Nonetheless, you have trusted your beloved government with handling such things. Okay, bet. They handle it terribly because despite having the evidence and even still having the evidence, they approach me, one of the more least vulnerable, a 30-year-old healthy man, one of the more least vulnerable people. You treat me like I'm 90 years old. This is about allocation of resources. And this is why I say doctors are not, no matter how we always say, trust the experts and so forth. First of all, they have bias, by the way. But none of these guys are economists or understand economics. I got to use that term, actually understand the economics, because a lot of economists don't understand. You got these Keynesians all throughout the government, big brains, and they don't know anything either. But we're talking about allocation of resources. This is a real thing. Scarcity is a real thing. So instead of trying to save who is the most vulnerable population, because by all statistical metrics, it's not an apocalyptic virus, by the way, but by all statistical metrics, there is a target demographic in terms of who is the most impacted when it comes to this virus. That's not my opinion. You can go look at your beloved New York City numbers. You can go look at anywhere that's collecting the data when it comes to who's more likely to even be hospitalized from this, as in let's say per 100,000 or per their population or what have you, or who's more likely to die from it. It's the older folk. It's the immunocompromised folk, comorbidities. But instead of building a policy that focused on those, what did they build a policy around? Forcing everybody into hiding. Now, not only did that put 30, 40, 50, million people out of work or something of that nature, not only did that happen, but still, they treated everybody as if we were all the same, and we're not. We're not impacted by that. I know you guys want, for whatever reason, this apocalyptic scale virus where everybody, it's like Ebola, where it just everybody that gets it dies, which that didn't happen with Ebola, but it was far more deadly. This is a very infectious disease, and you have to concede that, right? Because you've been telling us this, and at some point I've even believed that it's infectious. That in itself is what's unique. Now, what's not unique about it, though everybody pretends, is that, okay, this virus may not impact one person that much. Oh, dog's going crazy. But it may not impact one person but let's say this. As it is with pretty much any bacteria, virus, you may be okay, but another person may not. That in itself, people keep saying, oh, you may be asymptomatic, but you may get somebody else sick. That's not anything new. That happened long before this virus. I know everybody pretends like that wasn't the case. That happened long before this virus. This is why it's very important to build your immune system. That is a risk that every human being assumes that, when they live among other people. So it's not you don't have the right to get someone else sick. That's not what this is about. That's not in itself new. Okay? Nonetheless, it looks like pretty much everybody's going to end up getting this. Okay, bet. If you don't want people to pass from it, dog's trying to get out. I kind of locked him in. But I got to finish this video, so you get over it, Perry. But the virus, there's a target demographic, old folk and such. You build a policy protecting them. That should have been the approach before it long got here, because that evidence was available to you. However, even if I had to concede, you didn't want to look at the Italy numbers or you still trust Chinese numbers, understandably so. Didn't want to look at the South Korean numbers. All right, bet. Cool. Gotcha. You got your own data now. Still building a policy around, we're going to shut down bars. We're going to shut down this particular, like market, right? We're going to shut it down in its entirety. It's non-essential. Okay. What the hell are you doing? If it's as infectious as you say it is, pretty much everybody's going to get it at some point. You can sit here and wait all day long for a vaccine, and believe me, I'm not taking it. I'm not taking that first round of those vaccines. I don't know what's going to happen. I might grow a baby leg out of my neck or something. No, absolutely not. Either way, it may not ever come. When you consider other coronaviruses, who knows when this treatment will come, if it'll come at all. But sitting here waiting for this indefinite amount of time where we just shut everything down and we force people to, you can't leave the house unless you're getting this. And then when you leave the house, you got to go out looking like Scorpion and Sub-Zero and Rain and Ermac and Reptile when you go out. Anyway, nonetheless, instead of having that approach and treating us all like we're 90-year-olds, you should have been focusing on allocating those resources to protect the folks that were most vulnerable. We shouldn't have even been on the radar. Guys like myself, with a lot of the working population, if they wanted to assume those risks, they should have been free to assume those. But guys like myself, young cats, shouldn't have even been on the radar if it was supposedly this infectious. Should have. All right, this is life. The human beings have dealt with sicknesses and diseases. This isn't a new thing, I know. All right, so we know this is gonna impact the most. Let's do what we need to do to protect them. But that wasn't the approach. Instead, what these fools went out there and did was decided that we're gonna treat everybody as if they're the same, even though we know that there is a particular target demographic. There's gonna be somebody there's always that apocalyptic guy in the comments like, well, it leaves with some people, it may, even the people that don't get that sick, it may leave some permanent lung damage. It's always generic like that. By the way, that's not anything that's unique to the virus either. Believe it or not, you can even get a cold and basically any respiratory disease or sickness and illness risk permanent damage. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's not new, by the way. Nonetheless, they say that because they're trying to salvage this sort of nonsensical idea that it impacts everybody the same when it absolutely does not. Most people are not going to die from this, by the way, but it does not. For whatever reason, they were all in on doom and gloom, still all in on apocalypse. So they got to treat this as like it's just the most deadliest thing in the like as far as a disease if you get it when it's not. Nonetheless, they didn't build policies that were specifically dedicated towards protecting the most vulnerable. And you would think the boxes where old folk live amongst each other will be the top priority. And in some cases they prioritized it, but again, they weren't putting most of their energy there because they were too busy trying to build up these policies. They got, I know the spots on the East Coast, he's supposed contract tracing, and they're doing all of this, doing all of these sorts of things for these, let's inform the cops to pull people over or more so break up these big groups and do all of these things. You got to make sure all the businesses are doing this and this. You got to keep people 6 feet apart. You got to do this. If you don't, you can't open. If you get fined, or they dedicating all of these resources to doing stupid stuff like that, when the businesses should have been left to tend to their own devices in that regard and building their own new policies to make an adjustment to try to keep their folks safe, and you can choose whether to shop there or not. Most resources should have been specifically dedicated, not generically, specifically dedicated towards protecting like the nursing homes. Instead, you got idiots like Cuomo, who was actually allowing people that had the virus to go in the nursing home, basically setting off bombs in them. Stuff like that doesn't happen when you are real with yourself. And this is why I say that people that don't want to face the facts when it comes to this virus, they don't want to face the facts and they want to treat it like it's apocalyptic, they're very dangerous people. Because in order for you to properly assess a situation and analyze a situation, to then respond to it, you have to be honest with yourself and you have to be honest with how you analyze it. Because if you misdiagnose it, you can actually make the problem worse, which is exactly what they did. Not only did they not focus on who they should have focused on, they put other people out of work in the process, screwing up their livelihoods. Never mind the deaths from despair and all of that other stuff that they don't ever want to take credit for. You have to be real with yourself. I know it's cool, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and all the social media and the news. It's all apocalypse. This is good for ratings, good for numbers. It gives you an opportunity to virtue signal all over the place. Hey, look at me. I'm keeping us safe. I'm keeping the world safe. I'm being brave. I'm wearing a mask, and I'm advocating that you be mandated to wear a mask. Look at me, shut down. It's too early to open. It's all of this, which deviates from the fact that this is a virus in every spot throughout the world, for the most part. There is a target demographic, the people that are most vulnerable to it. Most likely to be hospitalized from it. Most likely to be severely injured from it. So when you talk about your overwhelmed hospitals and all of that, which, by the way, still as we know it, there may be pockets that get busy. Believe it or not, that happens throughout some industries. Think people get busy, right? But the vast majority of them, throughout the country, not overwhelmed. Sweden, not overwhelmed, that was supposed to be the idea, to flatten the curve. Now all of a sudden we're moving the post, went from flatten the curve to nobody ever gets sick, nobody ever dies from it, which is weird. But that tells you how the game's rigged. Y'all need to start being honest with yourselves and stop treating this like it's what it's not, because you're making the problem worse by doing so.